Two teenagers walked into a car dealership with nothing but excitement and respect. Minutes later, they were asked to leave due to appearing suspicious. The following day, their billionaire father arrived, not to express anger, but to ensure the incident was publicly acknowledged. The sun was heavy over Tempe that afternoon, one of those dry, slow-moving Arizona days where the heat hums through the concrete. After track practice, Malik Townsend walked alongside his sister Ayanna through the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery, his gray t-shirt damp against his back. They weren't intending to cause any disturbance. Malik, in fact, had been discussing this visit all week. "I'm not saying I'm getting a car today," he said, adjusting the strap of his gym bag. "But I want to see what they have. Maybe something used, you know?" Ayanna laughed, tossing her braids over her shoulder just to gauge expectations before her birthday. "You really think Dad is going to let you drive yourself to school in a two-door coupe?" "Come on," he smiled, but his steps didn't slow. "Let me dream." The dealership lot was still. Sleek silver sedans were arranged under sun-faded flags. The glass doors reflected the heat, and the two entered as any pair of kids with questions and wide eyes. The air conditioning inside was sharp, a contrast to the warmth outside. A middle-aged man wearing a pale blue dress shirt looked up from behind a counter. His gaze first fell on Malik, then moved to Ayanna. They were neatly dressed, Malik in athletic gear, Ayanna in a simple dress and sneakers. Their appearance was unassuming, quiet. Nevertheless, the man rose quickly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice concise. Malik, always courteous, approached. "Yeah, just checking out some cars. Maybe looking for something used?" "My birthday is next month, and do you have an appointment?" A man interrupted, already walking toward them. Malik hesitated. "No, we do not allow unsupervised minors in the showroom." He cut in, glancing quickly at a coworker across the room. "Company policy." Ayanna's face shifted. "We're not touching anything." "Still, this is not a hangout spot." His tone had turned colder now. "You can look at the website if you're interested." The silence that followed was thick. Malik started to speak, then stopped. Ayanna's fingers gripped the bag strap with force. "We'll leave," Malik said softly. They departed as such. There was no shouting, no resistance. Only the measured walk back along the sidewalk, with Ayanna holding her breath throughout. She remained silent until they were settled in the back of the Uber before she spoke. "That man regarded us as if we were insignificant." Malik acknowledged with a single, almost imperceptible nod. His jaw tightened. He touched his phone screen, verifying the ride time, and then gazed out the window. Ayanna observed her brother's reflection in the glass. She noticed how withdrawn he had become. He wasn't typically a boisterous person, but this felt different. It wasn't simply quietness, it was control. She remembered seeing that expression on their dad's face once before. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" He hesitated before replying. "Malik? I don't know," he finally said. "I don't even know what to call it." It's not like the man had said anything outlandish. He simply didn't want us present. Ayanna reclined. "It seemed unbelievable to me." Neither of them spoke for the remainder of the journey. It wasn't necessary. They were both aware of what had transpired. However, the man at the dealership was completely unaware of who he had just dismissed, and by the following morning, he would discover it. The Uber proceeded through the hills of Paradise Valley, where the houses grew larger, quieter, and more dispersed as they ascended. Ayanna sat with her arms crossed inside the black SUV, the tinted windows shielding her simmering frustration. Malik remained silent, holding his phone with the screen dark. His thoughts drifted away. Their home appeared, a contemporary white and stone house situated behind a private gate. It wasn't ostentatious, but possessed an expensive quality typical of established wealth or astute financial acumen. Their father, Charles Townsend, had constructed his technology company from the ground up, initially offering hardware repairs and Flagstaff before achieving success with a data security startup. Currently, his name appeared in Forbes articles and at Silicon Valley panel discussions. However, locally, he was simply known as Charles. The children entered through the side entrance and placed their belongings on the bench close to the kitchen. The house carried a subtle scent of cedar and fresh linen. Their housekeeper, Mrs. K, looked up from the dining table while folding towels. Hey everyone, is everything all right? Ayana mumbled in response. Malik did not answer. Their father's voice came from down the hall. Malik? Malik appeared in the hallway moments later, still wearing his navy polo, barefoot, and holding tablet. You're back early, he said, giving a shrug. Charles noticed a slump in his son's shoulders immediately, and the way he avoided eye contact. He glanced at Ayana. Her expression conveyed more than she likely intended. What occurred? Malik remained silent. Charles placed the tablet down and crossed his arms. Malik, Ayana exhaled. A man at the dealership stated we were not permitted inside. Charles furrowed his brow. Which dealership? Madison Auto Gallery, located off University Drive. What precisely did he say? Malik massaged the back of his neck. He indicated we weren't allowed to browse. He mentioned they don't allow individuals under the age of 18 without a parent present and accused us of loitering. Charles remained motionless for a considerable time. His eyes narrowed a little, not in anger, but with concentration. That measured, careful assessment that indicated he was anticipating 2 or 3 moves ahead. What did you do? We left, Malik stated. We didn't want to create a disturbance. That was impactful. Charles inhaled deeply, moved into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. He offered it to Malik before speaking again. You acted correctly. Do you understand? Malik affirmed once. Then, his father settled onto a counter stool and looked squarely at him. Please understand this. You are not inferior to anyone. I'm not concerned if you arrive in athletic wear or formal attire. Maintain your composure. And if someone perceives you as a cause for concern, that is their responsibility, not yours. Ayana rested against the fridge, observing. Charles continued, his voice calm and measured. However, you also need to be aware of this. Quietude does not invariably signify strength. Occasionally, allowing minor offenses to occur enables their repetition, first with one individual and then with another. Malik's throat tightened. What's the plan? Charles didn't respond immediately. He surveyed them both, then rose and retrieved his phone. I'm going to speak with someone, Ayana said, surprised. With whom? Charles replied, departing the room. The subsequent hours until tomorrow morning unfolded with an unusual calm. There were no shouts, no hurried phone calls. Charles prepared dinner, as always, grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. They ate together as a family. A change was palpable. It wasn't animosity, it was determination. That night, Malik lay awake, gazing at the ceiling for a considerable time before finally falling asleep. He didn't fully understand what his dad intended with the discussion, but he sensed it would be more impactful than any outburst. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the manager remained unaware that trouble was brewing. Madison Auto Gallery commenced business at 9 a.m. promptly. As early as 8:45, employees began arriving, their keys jingling, coffee cups in hand, and sunglasses still on. The typical Monday routine. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, rested against the front desk, sipping his iced Americano and checking his phone. He no longer recognized many of the names of his inbox. Employee turnover was significant. The position offered good compensation for those who could sell, and he was a skilled salesperson. By 9:03, there was one customer in the parking lot. A navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom shimmered in the Arizona sun. It did not enter a standard parking spot. It did not wait in the rear. It moved smoothly to the front doors and stopped. Initially, no one exited the vehicle. Derek looked at the receptionist, then walked around the desk. Are you expecting someone? He inquired. She replied, her gaze fixed on the car, no. Then, the door opened. A tall man emerged, wearing a dark blazer, sharply tailored slacks, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He moved deliberately, with composure. Without preamble, he pushed the glass door open and paused at the entrance. Good morning, he stated, his voice smooth yet resolute. I'm seeking a manager. Derek hesitated. I'm the assistant manager. How may I assist you? The man fixed him with a direct gaze. You're not the person I require. At that moment, Kyle Linson, the general manager, emerged from the adjacent office. He was tall, red-faced, and perpetually seemed stressed. Morning, he said quickly. I'm Kyle. What can I do for you? The man retrieved a card from his jacket pocket and offered it. Kyle read the name deliberately. Charles Townsend, founder and chairman. TNS Global. He looked up, a flush rising on his face. Wow, sir. I wasn't expecting," he stammered. "I imagine you weren't either," Charles replied, stepping further inside. "I won't take much of your time." Kyle indicated his office, his eyes briefly darting towards Derek. We could talk in here." But Charles remained still. No need for privacy. This is a public place. "I'll speak briefly." Kyle nodded, appearing uncomfortable. "Naturally. Please proceed." Charles surveyed the showroom. "Yesterday, 2 children entered. One was my son, the other my daughter." Kyle blinked. His throat moved. "I understand. They were informed they couldn't browse, that they should depart, that this establishment wasn't suitable for them." "Sir, we have—" Charles raised a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I'm not seeking a reimbursement. I experienced no loss yesterday. But you did. You missed an opportunity to act justly towards 2 young people, individuals raised to show respect for others, regardless of how they are treated in return." Several other employees had begun to move nearer, feigning to organize documents or wipe down surfaces. Charles continued, "My children are not disruptive. They are thoughtful, intelligent, raised with care, and they don't require your approval. However, they deserve to be regarded as people, not as dangers." Derek looked down at his shoes. The receptionist had ceased typing. Kyle cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, if I may, I'm not requesting an apology," Charles stated. "Apologies are simple. The crucial aspect is what one believes when no one is observing. The choices one makes when they presume no one will question them." He paused, allowing the silence to linger. "Because next time it won't be my children. It could be someone who lacks a father with connections to the media. They will leave this place with a memory that will likely remain unspoken, yet it will stay with them for the remainder of their lives." Then he turned to depart. But just before opening the door, he added, without looking back, "You can sell luxury without being small. I hope you understand how." Outside, a small gathering had formed. 2 individuals were recording on their phones, one local reporter acting on a tip, and a woman holding a microphone. Charles had not alerted them. The news had simply spread. A change permeated the air, not in temperature, but in feeling. Charles descended onto the dealership pavement with calm, measured steps. His expression remained steady despite the small group gathering. 2 college students from a local school stood apart, their phones out, quietly speaking to one another. A reporter from KXME5 News was already in the process of speaking, murmuring in her microphone, uncertain if she was broadcasting live. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not seek out a podium. He paused close to the entrance, straightened his jacket, and began to speak. "I hadn't intended to offer any words today. However, I understand the nature of things. If I remain silent now, another will attempt to voice my thoughts." He raised his gaze, observing the limited faces present. "My son, Malik, and my daughter, Ayana, arrived here yesterday afternoon. They were quiet. They didn't disturb anything. They came here to observe. Like any other young person with a flicker of anticipation and a hope in their heart, his voice remained steady. It wasn't booming, it was gentle. So gentle, it compelled people to draw closer. Yet they were asked to depart. Not for violating a regulation, not for handling something inappropriately, but because someone determined they didn't fit, that they presented an issue before they uttered a single word. The college student clutching the phone released a quiet, trembling sigh. Charles continued, "I've worked my whole life to build something that would last. And I've taught my children that what you build doesn't just sit in your bank account. It lives in how you treat people, in the everyday decisions, the ones you make when nobody's watching." He paused again, not for drama, but because the next words meant something. "Yesterday, someone looked at my children and didn't see who they were. They saw who they assumed they were, and they dismissed them. It's possible to be disrespectful without raising your voice. Sometimes it's about making someone feel diminished in a place they were eager to enter." Behind the glass doors, Kyle stood watching, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Charles glanced over his shoulder briefly, then returned his attention to the people ahead of him. I'm not suggesting anyone should boycott this establishment. I don't endorse that approach. I'm no longer even feeling anger. I am simply weary of observing this recurring behavior. It's deeply troubling to see young people treated as if they've committed crimes before any wrongdoing has occurred. Such experiences leave a lasting impact. Silence allows these situations to persist. Several more people paused on the sidewalk. A delivery person across the street adjusted their sunglasses to observe more closely. I came today because my children should not have been subjected to that kind of treatment, and because I want them to understand that when something is wrong, it shouldn't be ignored. You confront it with clarity, with dignity, and without allowing it to change who you are. He retreated towards a Rolls-Royce, his hand resting on the door handle. One more point. My kids left yesterday, holding their heads high. That speaks volumes about their character and reveals nothing about the person who attempted to diminish them. He entered the car and remained silent. The onlookers did not offer applause. There was no clapping. A stunned silence filled the space as everyone absorbed the information, the visuals, and the implications. Inside the dealership, Derek lowered himself into a chair. The receptionist's eyes were brimming with tears, and she couldn't explain why. Kyle Linson stayed near the window, his arms held rigidly at his sides. Yet, he understood that it was no longer possible to manage the narrative. By that afternoon, the first video appeared on Twitter, followed by Instagram, and then the news. The story began to develop independently. By lunchtime, the story had moved beyond local coverage. A shaky vertical phone video, initially recorded by college freshman Tori Clements, had already garnered over 2 million views on X. The accompanying caption stated, "This man just entered a dealership that disrespected his kids and addressed the situation with remarkable composure." I'm truly speechless. Viewers weren't simply sharing the video, they were analyzing it, pausing specific moments, magnifying details, and engaging in discussions and debates within comment threads. A woman from Flagstaff shared a story, noting that Charles Townsend repaired her father's laptop in 2001 and refused payment. She described him as having always been exceptional. However, other reactions were less charitable. One anonymous user, whose profile picture featured an eagle, questioned why the children hadn't disclosed their father's identity, suggesting a desire to portray themselves as victims, which led to the situation escalating. The story subsequently appeared on morning talk shows. During a segment titled, "Billionaire Father Calls Out Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership," Good Morning Phoenix reported that the dealership's Yelp rating plummeted from 4.2 to 2.1 within hours. Numerous one-star reviews appeared quickly. Customers cited concerns like rude and dismissive staff, feeling that a teenage son was treated like a criminal and vows to never return. Some reviewers claimed that unless one is wearing a suit and tie, they would be asked to leave before speaking. Naturally, the negative response wasn't solely from unfamiliar reviewers. Community organizations also started focusing attention on the situation, advocating for discussions regarding young people, societal views, and implicit prejudice. Amidst this, the dealership issued a response. This was a brief, 2-paragraph apology published on their website and Instagram page, stating, "We regret the recent experience that took place at our showroom and are actively reviewing our policies. We strive to provide a welcoming environment to all guests and take these matters seriously." The reactions online spoke volumes. The regret appears to stem from exposure rather than genuine remorse. Instead of policy review, perhaps employee evaluation is needed. This apology lacks sincerity, resembling a fine instead of an expression of concern. Privately, Kyle Linson was working to manage the situation. He had already contacted 2 PR consultants, both of whom advised him to minimize communication, avoid public attention, and refrain from attempts at damage control. However, online sentiment disregarded PR strategies. The public demanded openness, accountability, and concrete steps. While Malik and Ayana remained at home, their phones buzzed incessantly with messages, some from friends and others from unknown numbers. Ayana showed her brother a message that elicited laughter, even amidst the circumstances. "Girl, is that your dad on the news?" Tell him to run for office or something. I'm dead. However, more difficult messages soon followed. Why didn't y'all just walk away? One read, ain't nobody owes you a car. Another stated, not everything is about race. A final message simply asked, he probably thought you were skipping school. So what? Rich people want sympathy now? Malik glanced at his screen, his jaw clenched. Ayanna touched his shoulder. Don't read that, he mumbled, not looking up. He continued scrolling. Their father entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Put the phone down, Charles said. Just for now. Malik paused, then placed his phone face down on the table. Ayanna did the same. Charles sat opposite them, leaning forward a little. Ayanna frowned. You two didn't ask for this, but sometimes life decides your story's bigger than just you. But we didn't even do anything, she added. We just walked in. I know, he replied. That's what makes this so real. You did everything right. And still, someone saw you wrong. Malik stared at the tabletop. Is it always going to be like that? Charles paused, letting the question linger. No, he said, but you'll face it again. And when you do, you decide who you want to be in that moment. Reporters continued to gather outside. Inside, a feeling deeper than anger began to develop, awareness. And awareness is a persistent force. As the sun descended behind Camelback Mountain, it stretched shadows across the towns and backyard. It had been 2 days since Charles spoke at the dealership, 2 extended, peaceful days filled with news coverage, messages, and public commentary. Yet, shielded by the hedges, a sense of calm prevailed. Charles stood by the grill, methodically flipping salmon fillets. Malik was seated at the patio table, his elbows on his knees, gazing out across the lawn. Ayanna was leaning against the railing, her face hidden within her hoodie. There were no cameras, no inquiries, just family. You know, Charles began, without looking up when I was 16, I saved for 2 years to purchase my first car, a 1994 Corolla. It was faded red and had manual windows. Ayanna looked at him. You mentioned it didn't have AC, correct? Charles chuckled. None at all. A Phoenix summer nearly cooked me. But I cherished that car. I received that treatment not because of kindness, but because I deserved it. Malik finally glanced in my direction. Have you ever experienced something like that? Like we did? Charles acknowledged with a single nod. More times than I can recall. Being followed when entering stores. Being ridiculed when applying for bank loans. I was once refused service at a diner in Tucson. I was there with my code books in my lap, and I simply departed without a confrontation. But why didn't I respond? Malik inquired, mirroring my current reaction. Charles then turned another fillet. I didn't believe my voice held weight previously. I felt that remaining unnoticed was the sole path to progress. He paused, but I was mistaken. The grill emitted a quiet hiss. The truth is, son, enduring enough disrespect can lead you to forget what it feels like to be acknowledged. And I never desired that for you, nor for your sister. Ayanna took a seat next to her brother. You certainly ensured we were noticed. Charles now addressed them both. Being noticed isn't sufficient. One must be prepared for the consequences. The acclaim, the disapproval, the individuals who will support you for taking a stand, and those who will oppose it. Malik glanced at his hands. I never intended for it to become an issue. I simply wished to observe a car. I understand, Charles stated. That's what makes it significant. You weren't seeking attention. You were simply living your life. And someone objected to the appearance of that. They paused briefly. I am proud of you, Charles added. Both of you. Ayanna shrugged. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't attempt to demonstrate anything. You simply remained genuine, she said. It didn't seem courageous. It shouldn't, he responded. Courage is often understated. It's about not compromising your integrity in a world that occasionally lacks it. A quiet stillness enveloped the yard. Then Ayanna smiled. So, are we still searching for a car or what? Charles grinned. I anticipated you would inquire. Malik straightened up. Are you serious? Charles threw a set of keys onto the table. They fell near Malik's hand with a quiet clink. Check the garage tomorrow, he said. But it's not about the car. It's about who you become while driving it. That matters more than anything with an engine. Ayanna leaned into her brother, teasing. You better not crash it on the first day. Please, Malik shot back. I'm driving like it's made of glass. Charles laughed, and for the first time in days, the weight of the moment began to ease. Some stories conclude with anger, others with quietness. But this one concludes with a lesson. Sometimes the most effective way to respond is to remain upright, peaceful, truthful, and acknowledged. If this story evoked a feeling in you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge, connect, and remind us who we truly are. He ridiculed her speech, her attire, and even her willingness to voice her opinions. Yet, she remained composed, initiated playback, and observed the legal system expose him live. Danielle Riggins, having experienced much in her 42 years, recognized inconsistencies. The citation affixed to her windshield near the community center in Macon, Georgia, wasn't simply irritating, it felt targeted. She studied it briefly, peering at the listed offense. A citation for failing to yield in a pedestrian zone was received. However, she was not in the vehicle at the time of the alleged violation. Her Honda had been parked legally in front of the building while she was inside, leading a workshop for at-risk teens. She sighed, placing the paper into her bag. Danielle dedicates long hours as a youth counselor, providing assistance to kids who'd experienced hardship and lack sufficient support. Her financial status is modest. She is far from wealthy. Her profession consumed her, and with raising her teenage daughter and guiding children who resembled her younger self, her time was scarce. A penalty like this was more than just disappointing, it significantly impacted her schedule. However, it wasn't primarily about the financial burden. It was about the underlying issue of fairness. The subsequent evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and the citation before her. Her daughter, Aaliyah, was completing homework in the vicinity. "You're really going to fight it?" Aaliyah inquired, looking up from her textbook. Danielle chuckled quietly. "Yes, I'm weary of allowing things to pass." Aaliyah reclined. "Do you believe they will truly hear you?" Danielle paused, not responding immediately. She simply gazed out the window for a moment before replying, "I don't require them to listen. I need to be present and proceed according to my conditions." The following Monday, she contacted the municipal courthouse, requested a half day away from work, and highlighted her court date in red pen on the calendar. She chose a simple outfit for the hearing: dark jeans, a light blouse, and flats. No blazer, no makeup, just her natural appearance. The woman she saw in the mirror appeared weary, but also resolute. As she prepared to leave, she placed her phone in her back pocket, activated the voice memo app, and began recording. It wasn't an expectation, but a habit formed by experience. She's learned that people sometimes react negatively when a black woman asserts herself with assurance. She reached the courthouse 30 minutes before the scheduled time. The building was a small, aged brick structure with faded signage. Several other individuals were present outside, primarily working-class people attempting to find a moment for justice amidst their jobs and obligations. Inside, the clerk called names with minimal acknowledgement. Danielle remained still, her hands resting in her lap, awaiting her turn. The courtroom felt chilly. It wasn't until she heard her name, Danielle Riggins, case 407B, that her heart began to race. She proceeded to the defendant's table, her heart steady but alert, mirroring the advice she's given to the children in her youth programs. One can't always dictate actions, but one can control one's response, she observed. And that's when she saw him. Judge Gregory Lannister. Late 50s, silver hair neatly combed back, reading glasses perched low on his nose. His reputation was well known. Some described him as firm, while others labeled him arrogant. He glanced at Danielle over the rim of his glasses, his eyebrows subtly raised. "Ms. Riggins," he stated, emphasizing her last name, "let's proceed. I presume you're here to contest this ticket, issued by a trained officer?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I was inside a building, not driving, when the ticket was issued. I have witness statements available if required." He laughed, a genuine chuckle. "Naturally, you do," she replied, meeting his gaze. The judge then remarked, "You individuals frequently present narratives when appearing before the court. Always the victim. Never your fault. Let me guess. You didn't even see the officer writing it, right?" Her jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't simply skepticism, it was a more pointed feeling, and everyone in that courtroom could sense it. But Danielle remained composed, even as the atmosphere shifted. She recognized this was merely the start. Danielle did not react. She had encountered harsher remarks, both in delivery and purpose. However, hearing it from a judge in a courtroom populated by strangers carried a distinct discomfort. A heavy silence filled the room. People avoided reaction, though several eyes moved between her and the bench. Even the bailiff appeared uneasy. "Your Honor," Danielle stated, maintaining a calm voice, "I have proof I was inside. A sign-in log from the youth center. It displays my name and timestamp." Judge Lannister reclined in his chair and smirked. "You believe a log anyone can write improves anything? That's cute." A few quiet gasps arose from the back. Danielle noticed them. She also heard her heartbeat in her ears. But she remained focused. She wasn't present to be liked. She was present because she understood what was correct. "I'm simply requesting the citation be reviewed in light of the facts," she replied. "Oh, the facts," he mocked. "Well, let me tell you the facts. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've seen all the angles. You people always want the rules bent when they don't go your way." The words landed like slaps. Not just the content, the way he said them. He treated her as if she were a child occupying his valuable time. Danielle remained silent. A response wasn't necessary. He examined her citation once more, leafing through several pages. "What is this?" he inquired. "You didn't even secure legal representation?" "No," she replied, her voice calm. "I am capable of representing myself." A brief, sharp laugh escaped him. "Naturally," he said, turning to the clerk. "Next time, we'll mandate representation. Perhaps that will eliminate the theatrics." A woman seated towards the back, middle-aged and white, holding a traffic ticket herself, noticed Danielle. She appeared stunned and visibly uncomfortable, quickly averting her gaze when Danielle's eyes met hers. Danielle paused, composing herself. She hadn't intended to confront authority, yet she wouldn't allow her dignity to be disrespected. "Your Honor," she began, carefully selecting each word, "I'd like the court reporter to read back your comments." The effect of this request was palpable, noticeably shifting the atmosphere in the room. Judge Lannister blinked. "Please repeat the last few remarks for the record." The court reporter, a young man named Vince, shifted in his chair. "Mr. Tiller," the judge snapped. "We don't have time for this. Just proceed." Danielle remained still. "Then I will replay it myself." She retrieved her phone from her back pocket. Several people in the gallery leaned forward, curious about what was about to happen. "Ms. Riggins," the judge stated, her voice now firm, "recording in a courtroom is a violation." "I recorded myself, not the proceedings," she responded softly. "It's legal in this state, particularly for personal safety." She indicated the screen. Her own voice played back, quiet and steady. Then his voice followed. Every word was audible. "You people always come in here with stories. That's cute." The statement reverberated in the room, seemingly as if the ceiling had split open. Judge Lannister's expression changed, initially showing confusion, then irritation, and finally something akin to fear. He leaned forward. "That recording is out of order," he stated. "No, sir," Danielle said quietly. "What you said was out of order." A low whistle escaped someone in the gallery, quickly stifled by a hand covering their mouth. The bailiff moved forward but refrained from touching her. He remained silent, positioned between the two, uncertain of his next action. Danielle returned the phone to her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't appear smug. But she looked directly at the judge and didn't blink once. He lifted his gavel but didn't strike it. His eyes moved towards the court clerk, then to the bailiff. For a fleeting moment, he seemed to lose command of the room. However, the significant change didn't occur until the recess was called. That's when activity began behind the scenes. The judge announced a 15-minute recess, and the courtroom began to clear. Danielle rose, murmured, extended her limbs. Danielle remained seated. She wasn't finished. Her hands were still, fingers softly intertwined. She showed no tremor. Her composure wasn't rooted in fear. It was a calculated approach. She's worked with numerous children who are disadvantaged by systems that fail to hear them. She consistently advised them to record everything. Even quietude can serve as proof. Now, it was her turn to act on her own counsel. She retrieved her phone once more, this time to initiate a call. Danielle reviewed her contacts and selected one named Ethics Board Local, a number she had saved years earlier following a school board hearing involving one of her students. She hadn't anticipated needing it personally. A woman responded, stating, Judicial Oversight Office, South Georgia District. This is Ms. Carla Shep. How can I help? Danielle maintained a low, calm, and professional tone. Milisegun Shep. My name is Danielle Riggins. I am presently located at the Macon Municipal Courthouse, Room B. I have just experienced inappropriate conduct from a sitting judge. I possess an audio recording that potentially constitutes judicial misconduct. There was a pause on the line. I see, Ms. Shep stated slowly. Are you presently inside the courtroom? We're on recess. 15 minutes, give or take. Could you briefly describe what occurred? Danielle recounted the events accurately. Her summary contained no exaggeration, only factual details. The judge's comments, including mockery, the denial of the court reporter's request to read back the transcript, laughter, and dismissiveness were concerning. She stated, I have a voice memo of the remarks. I didn't record the courtroom, just my own audio. This is legal under state code, 16 to Order 11, 62. A pause followed, then the statement, Ms. Riggins, I'd like to escalate this to a supervising judicial officer. Can you remain in the courthouse? Her response was yes. The concluding words were, I'm dispatching someone now. Danielle ended the call, placed her phone in her purse, and released a quiet breath. She anticipated no accolades. She hadn't even expected victory, but she wasn't retreating. A young man, in his early 20s, visibly anxious and restless, approached her from across the room, waiting for his own case. Ma'am, he murmured, that was incredible. What you did required considerable bravery. Danielle offered a courteous smile. It's not bravery when it's simply the truth. He nodded swiftly and retreated. Several others glanced in her direction, not with sympathy, but with interest. Something was different. They sensed it. 10 minutes elapsed. People began returning to the courtroom. The judge was delayed. The clerk appeared anxious. Then the door beside the bench opened, but it wasn't Lannister who entered. A tall woman in her early 60s, dressed in a tailored gray suit with short platinum hair and sharp eyes, appeared. She proceeded directly to the clerk, bent forward, spoke quietly, and then looked up at the courtroom. Everyone, please remain seated, she announced. A murmur spread through the room. Judge Lannister will not be returning to the bench this morning. Danielle remained still. I am supervising Judge Merrill Vaughn, and I will be taking over this docket. She paused. Before we continue, I need to speak with Ms. Riggins privately. Please follow me, ma'am. Danielle stood, straightened her bag, and followed Judge Vaughn through the side door. The hallway felt narrow and was still. Judge Vaughn guided her into a small conference room and shut the door. I have listened to a portion of the recording, she stated without taking a seat. I'm also informed of a previous complaint against Judge Lannister. These details might support an active inquiry. Danielle remained motionless, observing her. I must ask, Vaughn proceeded, will you sign a sworn statement and present the recording as proof? Yes, Danielle responded without pause. Judge Vaughn nodded once. Unbeknownst to Danielle, her voice, recorded during a moment of quiet self-preservation, was poised to trigger events exceeding the expectations of anyone present in that courthouse. Danielle re-entered the courtroom, with Judge Vaughn immediately following. The atmosphere had noticeably changed. Conversations were subdued, and expressions were more attentive. Several individuals who had previously disregarded her were now attentive, observing her with what appeared to be respect, or perhaps curiosity. Regardless of the nature of their attention, she perceived it, yet remained composed. She returned to her seat at the defendant's table as Judge Vaughn approached the bench and addressed the court clerk. Proceeding with case 407B, she announced, Ms. Danielle Riggins is present. Judge Lannister is officially recused pending review. The announcement settled over the room with a sharp impact. It wasn't simply a brief absence. The judge was gone, and seemingly without return. The thought remained unspoken, yet palpable. Danielle remained still, awaiting further instruction. Judge Vaughn examined the citation and Danielle's accompanying paperwork. This included the witness statement, the center's login sheet, and even a timestamp text she had sent to her supervisor when she arrived that day. The judge looked up. "This is thorough, Ms. Riggins. You're clearly someone who values evidence." Danielle nodded once. "Working with young people, I've observed firsthand how things can unravel without proper preparation." There was a slight hesitation before Judge Vaughn responded. "It's a lesson more people should adopt as they mature, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't sympathy, simply recognition. One woman seeing another who chose not to compromise." Judge Vaughn turned the citation over, wrote something, and gave it back to the clerk. "This citation is voided," she stated. Ms. Riggins was released. Danielle did not smile. She merely collected her belongings. However, before she could leave, the judge stated, "For the record, your behavior in this courtroom, considering the situation, was remarkable. You maintained composure and dignity despite an unfortunate series of events." Danielle then permitted herself a brief, weary smile. "Thank you," she said. She departed the room as silently as she had arrived. But the atmosphere outside was altered. The hallway was filled with a palpable sense of unease. A courtroom aide, a young woman wearing dark-rimmed glasses and speaking with a hesitant tone, softly stopped Danielle near the exit. "Are you the one who recorded him?" she inquired, her eyes widening. "I am," Danielle responded. The aide looked around before saying, "You weren't the first. But you might be the one who finally got them to act." Danielle raised her eyebrows a little. "Others tried. There have been complaints," she murmured. "But nothing ever stuck. Either no proof or no follow-through." It was difficult to gain traction until someone possessed the courage and the evidence. Danielle remained silent. She felt no need to speak. Stepping outside, she inhaled deeply. The air seemed heavier than normal, not due to the weather, but because of the events of the past hour. As she approached her vehicle, her phone vibrated in her pocket. A new voicemail had arrived. She pressed play. "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Walt Desmond with the Georgia State Commission on Judicial Conduct. An initial recording from a Macon courthouse arrived this morning. We need to discuss a possible behavioral pattern concerning Judge Gregory Lannister. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." Danielle rested against the car door. Her intention wasn't to discredit a judge. She came to contest a traffic ticket. However, the truth unfolds according to its own schedule. And occasionally, when you voice a concern, you may inadvertently represent the interests of many others. By sundown that day, Danielle would discover the true extent of the situation. Danielle was halfway home when her phone rang again. She considered ignoring the call while driving, but the number displayed an official-looking area code for 7-8. She pulled over to the parking lot of a small grocery store in Warner Robins, parking under the shade of a faded sign, and answered, "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Desmond. Thank you for returning the call." His voice remained calm, but was precise, a person who carefully considered words before speaking. "We reviewed the audio," he continued, "and it's clear. Furthermore, it corresponds with prior grievances against Judge Lannister submitted during the last 3 years. Your testimony could be crucial in initiating an internal ethics review that has been delayed." Danielle tightened her grip on the steering wheel with her free hand. "What are the next steps?" she asked. "There was more," Desmond added. "An anonymous tip arrived this morning, shortly after your complaint was released on the internal channel. The tip contained financial records associated with Judge Lannister, including offshore transfers, unauthorized reimbursements, and a concerning pattern of rulings in favor of contractors with ties to a private law firm in Augusta." Danielle paused, visibly surprised. Could this be criminal corruption? Affirmative. And with this development, the situation extends beyond a simple personnel issue. It may involve criminal activity. She didn't respond immediately. Desmond continued, "You've already accomplished a lot. If you are willing, we might require a statement. You wouldn't be obligated to testify unless the investigation becomes more serious, and you would receive legal assistance throughout the process. Danielle breathed out, I will do what is necessary. Understood, he replied. You will be contacted by one of our ethics advisors by end of day. Thank you, Ms. Riggins. You've made more of a difference than you realize. The call concluded. Danielle remained still in her car for a few minutes, the quiet sound of far away traffic forming the backdrop. She wasn't certain whether she felt fear or power, perhaps a combination of both. She didn't share with Alia immediately, not due to concealment, but because she needed some time to process it herself. Later that evening, following dinner, as Alia cleaned the dishes, she inquired, So, how did it go? Danielle offered a small smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Let's just say I believe the judge won't be processing many more tickets. Alia grinned. You didn't strike him, did you? Danielle laughed. No, darling, but I made my point. The television played the local 6 o'clock news in the background. Danielle wasn't truly paying attention until the anchor delivered news that caught her focus. Breaking. A municipal judge in Macon is currently suspended from their position while an investigation proceeds regarding claims of misconduct. These allegations include discriminatory behavior and potential ethics violations. Alia accidentally dropped a dish into the sink. Wait, is that him? Is that your judge? Danielle asked, slowly sitting down. Looks like it, she replied. The anchor reported that sources verified the investigation began following a complaint filed earlier today by a local resident, an action that has now initiated an internal review of the judge's prior decisions. Financial documents, sent anonymously to the State Oversight Commission, seem to indicate connections between the judge and several private developers who have received advantages from his rulings. Alia looked at the screen, then at her mother, asking, You really did that? Danielle looked at her. I didn't do all that. I just said something. The rest have been waiting to come out. Alia's face softened. I'm proud of you, Mama. Danielle touched her daughter's cheek gently. It's not always about being loud. Sometimes it's just about refusing to stay quiet. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. New voicemail 1 minute long. She hit play. Ms. Riggins, this is ADA Kendra Malloy from the Bibb County District Attorney's Office. Thank you for providing the recording. Judge Lannister was taken into custody this afternoon for questioning. Currently, the ethics violations are under formal review and criminal charges are being considered. We would appreciate the opportunity to speak further with you if you are available. Please contact me at your convenience. Danielle observed the screen, then looked up. Alia was watching her, eyes wide. What now? She asked. Danielle shook her head. Now, I will call them back. Unbeknownst to her, a significant number of individuals would come forward in the days following, spurred by her resolute stance conveyed through a voice memo and unwavering resolve. Within 48 hours, Danielle's name circulated discreetly among legal offices, community groups, and even local newsrooms, not as a figure of fame, but as an emblem. She had not sought any of this recognition. She continued going to work, continued picking up Alia from school, and continued reminding the boys at the youth center to keep their pants up and their heads higher. However, things around her began to change. The first indication arrived the following week when Pastor Reuben Fields, who ran a coalition for court reform in Central Georgia, called her during her lunch break. You don't know me, Ms. Riggins, he began, but I've known about you since Tuesday. What you did. It wasn't insignificant. Danielle was in her car outside the community center, with a half-finished sandwich on her lap. I didn't do it for attention. I know, he stated, that's why people are paying attention. He requested her to speak at a future town hall. A simple request, just a few words about resilience, about respect, about not allowing authority to dominate individuals who are not always able to retaliate. She paused, but ultimately consented. That evening, Alia assisted her in choosing her outfit. Danielle requested a simple event. Alia playfully suggested, while playfully tossing her a colorful scarf, that someone might capture the occasion for Instagram. Might as well look unbothered and cute, she said. The town hall was unassuming, with folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, a few trays of donated cookies, and sweet tea. Danielle chose not to bring notes. She stood before approximately 50 people, hands by her sides, and spoke as if addressing one individual. "I didn't record that judge because I wanted to take him down," she stated. "I acted because I'd witnessed too many deserving individuals disregarded, and I refused to suffer a similar fate," the audience acknowledged with nods. Several individuals dabbed their eyes. As she concluded her statement, the attendees rose to applaud. Subsequently, an older woman, adorned with a wide-brimmed hat and holding a folder, approached her. She identified herself as Geraldine Baker, a retired schoolteacher. "I filed a complaint against that same judge in 2021. She stated, her voice gravelly but clear. "They dismissed it, claiming it lacked merit. Perhaps now someone would listen." Danielle took the folder from her hands. "I'll ensure someone does." In the days that followed, Danielle received more calls. A podcast producer from Birmingham, a law student from Emory who wanted to write her thesis on ethical failures in lower courts, and a public defender in Albany who asked if Danielle would participate in a courtroom training session for junior attorneys. She declined most requests, not because she was indifferent. She simply wished to avoid having her name become a hashtag. Her goal was for the children she worked with to view her as the same woman who had taught them resume writing and guided them through difficult conversations with their parents. However, she agreed to certain requests, particularly when she understood how many individuals needed reassurance that they weren't irrational. Activity at the center increased. Contributions arrived from people residing outside of Macon. A woman in Tampa contributed 20 backpacks, along with a handwritten message, "For the kids you champion and for the ones you're championing." "Thank you, Danielle." Alia seemed to gain confidence, too. One afternoon, she announced, "Ms. Brenner had us write in civics class about someone in our community who stood up for justice. I wrote about you." Danielle was surprised, asking, "Really?" Alia replied casually, "I was planning to choose John Lewis, but he's the obvious choice." Danielle chuckled. "I don't think I'm in his league," Alia remarked. Danielle responded, "I think you'd surprise yourself." What truly astonished Danielle, however, was the number of individuals who had been waiting quietly and with patience for another person to initiate action. 3 months later, Danielle was seated on the rear steps of the youth center shortly after closing time. The last of the teens had departed for the day, their laughter still resonating softly throughout the parking lot. The Georgia heat lingered, even as the sun descended, casting shadows on the fractured pavement. She took a drink from a water bottle and allowed her body to recover. It had been a demanding day and a demanding few months. She had presented at 4 panels, completed 2 interviews, and received a volume of inbox messages she couldn't manage. The investigation into Judge Lannister had expanded beyond her initial expectations. Following the release of the financial records, additional complaints emerged, not only from Macon, but also from surrounding counties. Rumors circulated suggesting the district attorney could file formal charges. The story had been featured on a national justice blog, and certain advocacy groups were now referencing Danielle's case in their training programs. However, all of that seemed secondary to what she truly prioritized. That day began with her witnessing Quentin, one of her teens, perform his debut spoken word poem at an open mic. He previously avoided eye contact. Now, he stood on stage, telling the audience, "When they try to shrink you, that's proof you're already too big to fit their box." No applause was necessary. That single moment justified all the effort. While she was seated, the center's director, Mr. Lou Bailey, came outside. A large man with gentle eyes and a deliberate pace settled beside her with a soft exhale. "You know," he began after a moment, "most people wouldn't have acted as you did." Danielle kept her gaze forward. It didn't feel like a decision. He nodded thoughtfully. "It rarely does when it's the correct action. We've seen staff depart and arrive, but I've never witnessed this place so lively. You provided these children with a unique experience." She allowed the sentiment to resonate. Occasionally, she stated, "I believe I simply felt worn out, weary of holding it back." That man seemed to assume he could address me as if I possessed no value, and for a brief moment, I nearly allowed it. However, I then recalled the advice I impart to these children daily. Maintain your posture, make your voice heard, and I understood that I couldn't request that of them if I was unwilling to embody it myself. Mr. Bailey murmured a subdued, and then rose. Are you prepared to secure the premises? Yes. Please allow me a moment. Once he entered the building, Danielle gazed upwards at the sky. A few stars began to appear, dim and dispersed, yet present. She considered the individuals who had remained silent, perhaps because they believed their opinion wouldn't be impactful, or they feared negative consequences, or they were simply weary. And she understood. She genuinely did. However, someone must initiate action. That doesn't signify superiority. It simply indicates they were frustrated enough to proceed, even when the situation felt unstable. Prior to departing, she retrieved her phone and composed a brief message on her social media page, an account she hadn't accessed in weeks. The message read, "If it feels like no one sees you, speak anyway. If it feels like they don't hear you, speak anyway. You never know who's watching." After pausing, waiting for a reason to share, she placed her phone in her bag, and secured the door behind her. Occasionally, bravery appears forceful, accompanied by raised fists and resounding chants. Sometimes, the path to change is not dramatic. It can be quiet, consistent, respectful. It involves simply appearing in a courthouse, even when unexpected. Danielle didn't require a platform to create change. She only needed to be present, speak honestly, and refuse to be silenced. In doing so, she not only defended herself, but also created an opportunity for Geraldine, for Quentin, for every voice that had been overlooked for too long, because authentic justice doesn't always begin with grand gestures. Occasionally, it begins with the youngest, with someone unwilling to yield. Should this narrative resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone in your life, or perhaps even reminded you of yourself, please consider subscribing, sharing it, and discussing it, as stories like this are not simply intended to be heard, but meant to be remembered. She was simply known as the janitor. They ridiculed her for reading while she worked. Then they were stunned when she delivered the valedictorian speech at graduation, revealing everything. At Larchmont Hills Academy, everyone recognized Olivia Cranston and Camille Strathmore. It was understood. They were the daughters of families who traveled by private plane and ate at restaurants where the menus didn't list prices. Their presence in a room prompted people to either rise or avert their gaze, a reaction born of habit, fear, or envy. They weren't malicious, not precisely, but they understood early on that kindness wasn't essential. Politeness was a choice. Deference? It was reserved for individuals who could provide something in return. And for someone like Janice Albury, the reserved black woman with gentle eyes and rough hands, there was no advantage to be found. Janice had been employed at the school for nearly 2 years. Each weekday, she arrived before sunrise and departed well after the final SUV had exited the gated parking lot. She scrubbed the floors, shined the trophies in the main hall, and ensured the restrooms were fresh. She seldom spoke unless addressed, and her voice, when she did, was as tranquil as a still pond. But Camille observed something one day during lunch break. She had forgotten her phone in the chemistry lab, and hurrying back, she noticed Janice in an empty classroom, not tidying, but looking through a large biology textbook, her lips moving as if saying something softly. Camille rested against the door frame and smiled. "I didn't think you were interested in science," she said. Janice looked up. "I'm just reviewing some earlier learning." Camille angled her head. "Are you going to teach now, as well?" Janice smiled. "Not precisely." It began modestly. There were whispered comments and laughter when Janice walked by. Camille told Olivia, and the two created a playful game from it. "Oh, look," Olivia whispered one morning as Janice wheeled her cart past their lunch table. "Einstein with a mop," Camille chuckled. Probably writing her thesis on floor wax. They laughed a little too loudly. Other students overheard. Some laughed with them. Others avoided eye contact. No one intervened. Janice kept her head down. It was her usual practice. The students overlooked the way her eyes paused on the school crest etched into the wall, her gaze thoughtful rather than resentful. They failed to observe her tendency to listen more than to speak, or her habit of keeping a notebook in the side pocket of her cart, partially filled with notes. One person showed her kindness. Mr. Del Toro, a literature teacher from Fresno who had a fondness for those often overlooked. On one occasion, he observed Janice carefully aligning the copies of To Kill a Mockingbird on a cart just outside his classroom. You know, he remarked, most people simply stack them and proceed. Janice offered a slight shrug. That book warrants more than crooked edges, she said. He chuckled. I often say that, he stated, then paused. Have you read it? Janice responded to his question. Twice. Initially in high school, and subsequently when I was mature enough to grasp its true significance. He never requested anything further, but from that point forward he would leave a book for her on the bench outside the staff room every other Friday. No message, no inquiries. Nevertheless, the girls persisted. One afternoon, Olivia waited until Janice passed by, then whispered, I bet she sleeps in the janitor's closet. Probably dreams in Clorox. It wasn't simply impolite, it was unkind. But Janice continued walking, and that disturbed Olivia more than anything. She anticipated embarrassment or anger, or at the very least a reaction. Janice's silence, however, felt inescapable. This made her a figure to be reckoned with. The lights at Northwood High typically dimmed around 8 p.m. Most evenings, though a few always remained lit, sufficient to create long shadows across the marble corridors. It was during these hours that Janice seemed to transform. As the classrooms fell silent and the usual teenage bustle subsided, she would move her cart into the supply closet, change into a clean shirt, and bring her notebook to room 114. Room 114 was no longer designated for a specific class. It had a flickering light and one desk leg shorter than the others. Most teachers steered clear of it. However, Janice had adopted it. The door did not lock, and that was acceptable. She didn't require privacy. She simply needed space. She would retrieve her laptop, a 6-year-old Dell lacking the N key, and sign into her coursework. She was 6 credits shy of finishing a degree in educational leadership through an accelerated adult program offered by the same university that operated Larchmont Hills Academy. A small, understated provision located within the staff handbook provided full scholarships to employees who worked a minimum of 30 hours a week. Most staff members overlooked it. Janice had not. It wasn't about ambition at this point. The focus was on completing a project that had been halted years prior. This was a time when she possessed a child, a husband, and a secure job in Maryland, only to lose all 3 within 18 months. Life has a way of deflating you before you're aware you've been holding your breath. She never expressed her struggles to anyone. It wasn't a behavior she'd been taught. Occasionally, late at night, she would receive a message from her sister in Detroit. You sleeping or still playing superhero? Janice would respond with a photo of her textbook and a brief message. Chapter 6 is proving difficult. Her sister would then send a laughing emoji, followed by, You're still the smartest person I know. Don't let those stuck-up girls get to you. She never shared with her sister the full extent of the difficulties. She omitted the incident where Camille accidentally knocked over the bucket of dirty water and seemed to find amusement as Janice knelt to clean it. There was also the incident when Olivia confided in a group of parents during a school tour, suggesting the institution favored hiring individuals with charitable backgrounds. Yet, Janice persisted. She consistently arrived 5 minutes early. Her cart was always spotless, her uniform immaculate. She possessed patience but lacked innocence. Her understanding of the school's customs surpassed that of the students. Beneath the refined wooden interiors and carefully selected diversity pamphlets, there existed a decay. Not everyone, naturally, but sufficiently pervasive to permeate the atmosphere. Janice had no intention of rectifying it. Her task was simple: observe, listen, and document. Unbeknownst to the students, and even the staff, Janice had been selected for a role extending beyond cleaning floors. 2 years prior, following an internal report alleging the Academy's neglect of racial and economic discrimination, the Board of Trustees approved a discreet strategy. They decided to place someone within the school, silently. someone who wouldn't attract attention, someone who could witness everything. While working part-time at a community college in Oakland, Janice received a job offer. The position came with no title or special privileges, simply an ID badge, a mop, and a defined purpose. That purpose was to observe, to take notes, and to document the patterns of behavior that were not able to be captured in policy memos or camera footage. The work was not glamorous. However, it was significant. And late at night, with her coursework open in one window and her field notes in another, Janice recorded everything. It wasn't only the cruelty, but the indifference, the smiles that vanished the moment someone turned away. She also wrote about the good teachers, the limited number of students who met her gaze. She recalled how Mr. Del Toro left that copy of Beloved with a sticky note that said, "For someone who understands silence." Still, each shift drained her, not from the labor itself, but from a necessity of feigning. She bore their ignorance as a second uniform, and with each passing day, it became increasingly burdensome. A change was on the horizon, though not as they anticipated. By early spring, the students at Larchmont Hills Academy were already largely disengaged. Señoritas had arrived gradually, like a dense fog, subtle, pervasive, and self-satisfied. Olivia and Camille frequently spent their days in the senior lounge, examining college acceptance emails and making critical remarks about those they perceived as inferior. However, subtle comments were no longer sufficient. The initial excitement had faded. They desired a significant reaction. On a Monday morning, Camille entered the admin office and pretended to be worried. "I think the janitor's been stealing test copies," she whispered to the front desk clerk, making her voice sound very low. "I saw her in a classroom late at night, alone." Ms. Robbins looked surprised. "Janice, are you certain?" Camille adopted her most innocent expression. "I don't want to cause problems for anyone, but this school is supposed to be secure, isn't it?" It was a carefully planned action. If anything resulted from it, so much the better. A sense of unease lingered. That afternoon, Janice was summoned to the operations office. The interaction was presented as a standard procedure with no direct accusations. She remained composed as the facility's manager reviewed his notes, visibly ill at ease. "We simply wanted to inquire if you've been present in unoccupied classrooms during your shift," he stated. "I clean all classrooms assigned to me." Janice responded directly. "Yes, but do you remain longer? For any purpose?" He maintained eye contact. "I complete my assigned tasks. Occasionally, I require a brief respite, as do most people." He acknowledged this with a nod and made a note. "Very well, that concludes the discussion." Janice rose. "Should any questions arise regarding my work, I would welcome a straightforward discussion." The gentleman's cheeks flushed slightly. "There are no concerns. Simply, you understand procedure." It was a flimsy fabrication, and both were aware of it. Outside the office, Janice located Camille resting against the wall, feigning interest in her phone. The smile offered was not amicable. "Everything's satisfactory, Miss Albury?" Her tone was saccharine. Janice remained unmoved. It was more effective than one might expect. Camille's face faltered briefly, then quickly returned to its characteristic sneer. However, this was no longer a trivial matter. Camille and Olivia had matured observing individuals evade consequences. This fostered their confidence and impulsiveness. 2 days elapsed before Olivia planned a further incident. She let a silver necklace fall near the janitor's closet and then dramatically announced its disappearance from her locker during lunch. A small crowd assembled. She raised her wrist in a theatrical gesture. "I'm certain I had it in there earlier today," she declared. "I suppose it could be lost permanently," Camille observed. Their friends chuckled, some visibly anxious. "Perhaps check the mop bucket," they joked. However, when one of the admin staff overheard the remark and volunteered to investigate, Olivia quickly recanted. "No, I'm sure I simply misplaced it. It's nothing significant," she said. The immediate concern subsided, but the awkwardness remained. That evening, Mr. Del Toro walked past Janice in the hallway. He stopped. "You're doing okay," he said. Janice looked up from her card. "You've been here long enough to know the games these kids play," he sighed. "Too long sometimes." There was a pause. Is there anything I can do? She thought for a moment. Keep doing what you're doing. That's rare enough. What neither of them knew, what no one knew, was that Janice had already sent her first internal report to the board. Documented dates, quotes, and behavior patterns were observed. Names redacted for now, but she wasn't the only one being monitored anymore. An independent firm had initiated discrete audits. These audits included interviews and surveys presented as student engagement questionnaires. Camille and Olivia believed they had complete control over the school, but attention was shifting. Rumors began to change their focus. Despite this, the girls continued their actions. Cruelty had developed into a pattern, and patterns are difficult to change when they have never faced repercussions. Then, one Friday, Janice heard something that stopped her. In the lounge, behind a cracked door, Camille was speaking to a boy from the tennis team. "You know that janitor, Janice?" she said. "My mom says people like her are just here to make the place look diverse." She referred to it as optics. The boy laughed. Olivia added, "My dad said the school's bleeding money giving those scholarship perks to staff. It's basically charity," Camille scoffed. Unable to repair the situation with books, Janice stood quietly, 1 foot still in the hallway, one hand gripping the edge of her cart. She said nothing, but something within her shifted. She had been patient long enough, but now she had everything she needed, and it was almost time to show them. Before she was sweeping floors under fluorescent lights, Janice Albury had been someone else entirely. 12 years prior, she held the position of Director of Curriculum Development for a public school district in Maryland, known then as Janice Simmons. Her responsibilities included managing a corner office, overseeing 3 staff members, and proudly displaying a plaque from the state superintendent. She was married and a mother. Life at that time possessed a sense of order and comfort. However, that changed with a tragic event. Her husband's car was struck by a delivery truck on I-83 during a snowstorm. He perished in the accident. Her daughter, Kira, who was 6 years old at the time, survived, though with significant injuries. After 2 months spent in a hospital bed, Janice faced a year of surgeries and rehabilitation. While insurance covered a significant portion of the expenses, some costs remained. Janice drew upon her savings, her retirement funds, and ultimately sold their home. Following this, Kira developed pneumonia, which tragically led to her passing. Janice resigned from her job 2 weeks following the funeral. The sight of a school brought back the image of Kira's empty chair, and the sound of children's laughter in the hallways served as a painful reminder of her loss. She moved around, taking temporary work, staying with friends, then in rented rooms, ultimately settling into a small studio apartment in Antioch, California. Despite these changes, she consistently read and continued learning. This pursuit led her to discover a program, a little-known educational equity initiative offered through a university partnership, representing a fresh opportunity. When asked if she would agree to work undercover to examine behavioral differences between students from privileged backgrounds and faculty perspectives, she readily accepted. She acted not out of financial need, but because the system had let down too many individuals resembling her. She refused to accept this inaction. Applying for the janitorial position using her maiden name, she successfully completed the background checks, keeping her degree and credentials secured in a folder at home. Initially, her goal was simply to observe and listen, to remain unnoticed. She had no plan to participate. The incidents she witnessed were disheartening. A senior teacher deriding a student with a speech impediment under the assumption of privacy. Discussions about a girl's financial aid occurred at a staff meeting, presented as a personal failing. Then there were Camille and Olivia, whose parents' substantial donations had secured the gymnasium's naming rights in honor of a hedge fund. Their self-assurance stemmed not from conceit, but from a sense of privilege. Janice felt disheartened by what she observed. Eleanor Larchmont, the school's founder, had originally conceived of the academy as a place for future leaders from all backgrounds. However, that original vision had diminished over time, obscured by financial influence, promotional efforts, and preferential admissions practices. Consequently, Janice began her work. Her notebook rapidly filled with detailed observations, specific dates, recurring linguistic patterns, staff reactions. She consistently attended faculty meetings when possible, choosing to sit in the rear of the room. She posed inquiries that prompted discomfort among those present. She took on committee assignments that others avoided. Steadily and carefully, she became the source of information the board required. And during evenings, as the halls became vacant, she studied. She wasn't simply observing, she was revitalizing herself. Each finished module advanced her progress toward that second degree. Each submitted essay felt like rediscovering a part of the woman she once was. During one evening spent reviewing a case study about institutional gatekeeping, a particular sentence caught her attention. It stated that genuine authority doesn't proclaim itself, it waits to be recognized. She emphasized this line with underlines. Graduation was approaching rapidly, just 3 weeks away. She had finished the program without drawing much attention. Her grade point average ranked her among the highest in her group. The board had previously approved her to address the audience. Camille and Olivia continued to walk through the halls with an air of confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. The faculty, too, were on the verge of a realization that learning extends beyond the classroom. Janice had observed them for 2 years. Now, she was poised to step forward, taking the central position, and they would be completely surprised. That morning, the sky above Antioch was clear, excessively bright considering the anxiety some individuals brought into the Larchmont Hills Academy Auditorium. Families occupied the seats, proud parents filled with anticipation and clutching phones, surrounded by flowers, ties, and costly perfume. The scene appeared flawless. Camille Strathmore wore a champagne-colored stole that her mother had flown in from France. Olivia Cranston had her hair professionally styled before dawn, her makeup applied to endure the entire day. They smiled for photographs, laughed with joy, and stood with the grace of young women who'd been raised to believe the world was within their reach. Behind the scenes, Janice remained still in her black robe. There were no embellishments, no unnecessary details. She declined the academic award the committee presented, stating she had no need for it. What she desired was a single moment, just one, and that moment had arrived. The dean, Dr. Leonard, approached her, holding a program. "Ready, Ms. Albury?" She met his gaze. She had been prepared. He offered a restrained smile and returned toward the podium. Camille and Olivia did not even look at her as they passed by in their elegant gowns. It was understandable. She was unnoticed once more, simply an element of the surroundings. The ceremony commenced as it always did. Names were announced, families applauded, and speeches were delivered. The school's jazz trio performed something gentle and unremarkable. Subsequently, Dr. Leonard approached the microphone. "As we approach the end of this year's commencement, we have a particularly noteworthy announcement, one that, intentionally, has remained private until this moment." Students adjusted in their seats. Parents moved closer. Even faculty appeared puzzled. This year, the Board of Trustees authorized a confidential academic pilot program meant to enable working staff at our institution to pursue higher education with complete anonymity. The program demands both academic excellence and professional integrity of the highest order. Camille glanced at Olivia. Olivia showed a frown. Murmurs began behind them. Dr. Leonard proceeded. "We are pleased to announce that the highest academic honor this year goes not to a student you might have learned alongside, but to someone many of you overlooked." He paused, then stated distinctly, "Please welcome Janice Albury, this year's valedictorian." A stillness hung in the air. Then, with a suddenness like a glass shattering in a quiet room, the news arrived. People turned their heads, their mouths agape. Camille remained motionless, her expression rigid. Olivia blinked, then attempted a laugh, only to find herself laughing alone. Janice proceeded deliberately to the stage. Her movements were controlled, her posture upright. She avoided looking at the assembled group until she reached the podium. Then, she surveyed the audience slowly, her gaze finally fixing on Camille and Olivia. Following this, she began to speak. I arrived at this school with a mop in one hand and a question lingering in my thoughts. Her voice resonated, strong and clear, without any doubt. I found myself questioning the true nature of this institution. Beyond the official statistics, the promotional materials, and the presentations, I wanted to determine if respect was readily available here, or if it was something that needed to be gained only by those who possessed the appropriate attire, footwear, and family names. The auditorium was completely silent. I dedicated countless evenings tidying up after those who spoke negatively about me. And when they observed me reading a book or attending a classroom session after hours, they mocked. She paused. However, my focus extended beyond mere reading. I was observing, studying, not solely to earn a degree, but to uncover solutions. She turned slightly toward the faculty, and now I possessed them. Students surveyed the room, adjusting in their places. Olivia's expression remained inscrutable. Camille clutched her program firmly, her knuckles white. Janice lifted her chin. I stand here today, not just as your valedictorian, but as a reflection of the very things that Elmwood High claims to stand for: growth, opportunity, and truth. But she hadn't revealed everything yet, and what she said next would change the room forever. You could hear a cough from 3 rows back. A chair creaked. A phone buzzed quietly against someone's hip, but no one moved to check it. A hush fell over the room as people leaned in, anticipating Janice's next words. She proceeded deliberately, taking a drink of water, briefly reviewing her notes, and neatly folding them. Then, she raised her gaze. I'm sure some of you are wondering how I came to be here. She began, gesturing to her robe and the podium. A few members of the front row, largely faculty, nodded in agreement, seemingly unaware they had done so. My presence here wasn't solely for the purpose of earning a degree, she added. 2 years ago, the university board contacted me following concerns raised, discreetly, privately, regarding the increasing atmosphere of class division and privilege within Ashworth Academy. They requested I consider a position, but not as a faculty member, not as a consultant, as a janitor. At this, the room shifted. Janice allowed the silence to linger. My purpose was to observe. Away from executive suites and scheduled gatherings, I observed. In the corridors, the athletic facilities, the classrooms buzzing with after-hours conversations where students felt safe to speak openly, believing they were unobserved. I was attentive. A woman among the parents visibly expressed discomfort. Over a period, I noted seemingly minor incidents. Yet, these minor incidents accumulated. I saw how some students treated those they perceived as outsiders. I noticed how the lack of intervention from adults permitted that behavior to escalate, and how some of you, who should have been more informed, chose to ignore it. She looked toward the staff. Some of you were aware, and you remained silent. The words struck with force. Camille's mouth felt parched. Olivia had ceased breathing through her nose. She remained motionless, as if blinking would make her vanish. The most troubling aspect, Janice continued, is that the behavior was not concealed. It was open, commonplace, accepted, and frequently it was encouraged, amid smiles, with focus, and with widespread recognition. She paused, taking a moment. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to offer a reminder. Her tone became gentler. You cannot determine someone's worth based on their clothing or their profession. You cannot assess dignity through financial status or lineage. She lowered her gaze briefly, then raised her head with renewed focus. I once had a daughter. Her name was Kira. She would have been your age now. A stillness fell over the audience, similar to a chilling breeze. She passed away before she had the opportunity to wear a cap and gown. I'm not sharing this to elicit sympathy. I am sharing it because I see her in all of you. I see who she could have become. And I wonder, if she had been here, would she have been ridiculed as well? No one dared respond. Perhaps not. However, what I know for certain is that if you depart here today believing the world will defer to your name, you have already failed. She paused again. Education is not merely about books and tests. Remember how you handle the individual you believe you'll never require assistance from, because life possesses a peculiar tendency to shift unexpectedly. Subsequently, the final setback occurred. I have delivered my conclusive report to the board. My assessment has led to a restructuring of the scholarship program, emphasizing integrity and contribution rather than legacy. A comprehensive audit of disciplinary cases spanning the last 5 years will be conducted, and students involved in harassment, encompassing verbal and social forms, will be subject to formal reviews. A subtle vibration resonated from the rear. Several parents murmured amongst themselves, their voices becoming more audible. Janice moved back a little. This isn't retribution, it's accountability. She fixed her attention on Camille, then Olivia, who had lowered her gaze to the floor. And accountability is not swayed by the wealth of your father. However, that wasn't the finality of the matter, as repercussions would follow even after the applause subsided. The ceremony concluded with noticeably diminished enthusiasm compared to its start. Some students applauded, while others seemed unsure how to react. A small number of families, appearing uneasy, left the room before the conclusion. However, Janice maintained her composure, smiling as she returned to her place. It wasn't the back row where she previously observed, but rather near the front, alongside board members and professors who now regarded her with a noticeable change, respect. Camille did not speak as she departed the auditorium. Her father was already waiting close to the car, his expression stern, avoiding her gaze. Olivia's mother, arms crossed, stood by the valley in stunned silence. There were no congratulations, no flowers, just silence. Inside, a small crowd had gathered around Janice. Teachers who had previously offered only a polite greeting were now shaking her hand. Mr. Del Toro remained at a respectful distance, waiting for an opportune moment. You didn't simply speak, he stated when they eventually talked. You transformed the entire atmosphere. Janice looked at him and smiled softly. The air had needed changing. Upon the lawn, several of the younger students expressed their awe. A girl wearing a red dress confided to her friend, "I wasn't aware she attended school," to which her friend responded, "I didn't know she could articulate herself so eloquently." A sense of belated recognition began to spread, an acknowledgement of what had been missed, what had been consciously disregarded. That evening, Janice was in her apartment, with a plastic container of leftover chicken salad and the commencement program placed on the table next to her. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the board's director. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message stated, "Your final report is being reviewed. Policy meetings begin next week. Your courage will shape the future of this school." She set the phone down and exhaled. It wasn't relief, it wasn't pride, but a quiet, grounded sense of purpose. The kind that didn't require applause or accolades. Meanwhile, news about the graduation speech spread quickly. A video shared online by a teacher's assistant was already spreading among parents and alumni. The title was straightforward: Janitor or Genius, Larchmont's Graduation Shocker. Regarding Camille and Olivia, Camille was required to attend a disciplinary review. Her parents were obligated to participate. A scheduled summer internship at her father's firm was discreetly canceled. It was rumored that she would be asked to fulfill community service hours before receiving her diploma. Olivia's parents initially resisted, indicating they would pursue legal action and requesting apologies. However, upon the school sharing portions of Janice's records, containing witness statements and documented incidents, they ceased their objections. Olivia was permitted to graduate, although her honors were removed. Both girls remained silent regarding the matter, but those familiar with them observed a change. The teasing ended, and the hushed conversations also stopped. The following fall, Janice received a new opportunity, the role of Director of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives for the school district. She agreed to take the position. On her final day, as she walked the halls with her cart, she placed a sticky note on the supply closet door. It read, "Respect isn't owed, it's revealed." With clean floors, clear eyes, J.A., and a final goodbye, she left the mop behind. Leaving Larchmont Hills, she wore a navy blazer and carried a satchel, not to demonstrate professional advancement, but because she felt no further need for discretion. 1 week later, she returned, not in a work uniform, but as a guest speaker for the new staff orientation. Standing at the podium again, she addressed the teachers, new hires, and assistants. Your job title doesn't determine your influence, she stated. How you treat people when no one's looking does. Her voice resonated to the back of the room, and this time, everyone was attentive because they finally grasped the meaning. Respect isn't about volume, it's about the impact you make. If this story resonated with you, if it prompted you to reconsider how we treat people, we believe it's sufficient. Subscribe to the channel, share this story, and discuss it. The world would benefit from more individuals with qualities similar to Janice's, and it's valuable to remember that the most reserved person present could impart the most significant lessons.